If you have ever been near trains in the United States, chances are you have heard a K5LA, one of the popular types of train horns. Its tones are D sharp, F sharp, G sharp, B, and then another D sharp. A very similar chord can be produced by playing tones of a D sharp undertone series. What is an undertone series? Pick any fundamental frequency and divide it by 2, 3, 4, and so on. We will get lots of natural intervals. First we go down an octave, then a fifth, then a fourth, then a major third, then minor third, then this weird white second, then another weird white second, then the actual second, etc. Play only the 8th, 7th, 6th, 5th, and the 4th tone of the series and get the Amtrak train horn. The undertone series is a mirror of the overtone series starting on the same note. The undertone series have the same intervals between the tones, but going in the opposite direction. This has an interesting consequence. When there is a major triad in the overtone series, a minor triad can be heard at the same position in the undertone series. The undertone series has a very practical application in early game audio. Integer subdivision of the clock signal frequency in order to generate audible frequencies. Here's how it works. We receive the clock signal of a known frequency, and let's say in our example it will be 12 kilohertz. Typically it's higher than that, but about that later. And then we pick an integer that will determine the output frequency. And we keep count of the clock pulses. And when the counter equals the integer we picked, we invert the flip-flop circuit. And the output from this flip-flop circuit is the square wave that is used as the output audio signal. And by changing the integer, we change the pitch. When counting to 1, we flip the output with each incoming pulse. This will be the fundamental frequency of our undertone series. Counting to 2, we'll divide this frequency by 2, and we play 1 octave lower. Counting to 3, we'll divide this frequency by 3, and so on. It's actually one of the easiest and cheapest ways how to digitally control the output frequency, and this is why it was so popular on old 8-bit computers such as home computers by Atari in the late 1970s and early 1980s. This technique has, however, an inherent problem with musical tuning, at least when equal temperament chromatic scales are needed. They cannot be precisely represented by undertone series. Chromatic intonation using undertone series will always be just an approximation. How good an approximation? Let's find out. Let's start with the fundamental frequency of 12,000 Hz, and let's try assembling a chromatic scale that contains the A4 note at 440 Hz. For starters, we cannot even produce this frequency. The closest we can do is 430 Hz, which is a quarter tone lower. That's why this key is shown in red. The green keys will play reasonably in tune, and, well, the worst are the gray keys whose notes can't be approximated at all. In other words, the nearest member of the undertone series would be closer to another note on the chromatic scale. For example, the nearest note to C5 would play 76 cents higher, which is closer to C sharp than C. When playing the low-pitch notes, the intonation is much better than when trying to play high-pitch notes. And that is because the resolution of the undertone series is improving only as we get farther from the base frequency. The closer we are to it, the further apart the notes are. Increasing the clock speed improves the intonation. See how this entire keyboard is turning green as I increase it. And similarly, decreasing the clock speed worsens the intonation. At the clock frequency of 768 kHz, all notes would be within 1 cent, which is enough for musical applications. I have heard that the integer division of megahertz frequencies happens, for example, in the Yamaha SK30 synthesizer. But good luck trying anything with the clock frequency of, let's say, 1500 Hz. Well, if a faster clock means better intonation, why not pick the frequency as high as possible? Well, sure. But there is another constraint, and that is the range of the counter used to do the frequency division. It was often limited to a certain number of bits. For 8 bits, the divisor couldn't be bigger than 256, which sets the lower limit on the output frequency range. This is how the situation looks like at 48,000 Hz with an 8-bit frequency divider. We would not be able to play below G2. Okay, let's talk about real hardware examples. Atari 400 and higher models utilized the POKEY chip, whose default clock speed was approximately 64 kHz. By default, the 8-bit counters are used. The standard square wave would go from C3 upwards. The undertone series is one of the things that make the signature sounds of the Atari sound effects. All the frequency sweeps are nice and crispy, and that's because there are no frequencies between the tones of the Undertone series. What would be a continuous sweep, if produced using only an analog synthesizer, would be in fact a rapid sequence of notes of constant pitch. Atari 2600 was even more Spartan. The counter was only 5-bit, that is, only 32 possible pitches could be produced on a single undertone scale. It featured multiple undertone scales, but still the intonation was so limited that you couldn't even play all tones on a chromatic scale. Undertone series are fun. If you want to experiment on your own, get Gradrigo, my audio programming environment that you can download for free. It features the Undertone organ. It's a fun way of exploring the Undertone series using a MIDI keyboard. And if you don't feel like installing anything, most of the screens that I have been using in this video are available on my GitHub. If you like these videos, please subscribe to my channel and consider supporting me on Patreon. As always, a huge thanks to my existing patrons. I know I have been testing your patience this time around, but I'm back to producing content now. And that would be it for today. Well, actually, it isn't, because this whole video has been pretty nerdy so far, so why not get even nerdier? Most oscillators, when vibrating at their fundamental frequencies, are very likely to throw in some overtones as well. Different oscillators would produce a different mix of overtones, and the human auditory system has learned how to perceive these mixes as the timbre of a tone. Since it is rare that oscillators would produce undertones, this frequency mix-to-timbre mapping has not developed in the human auditory system, and so, rather than single notes of a specific timbre, as would be the case with the Overtone series, we always perceive multiple tones of the Undertone series as chords. Okay, now I'm done. See ya.